Welcome, 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 everybody. So happy to see you here for another episode of Heal Profoundly and Enduringly. This is the show that brings you really deep, profound, enduring ways to be able to heal yourself and empower yourself to take this journey if you don't feel like you're ready to reach out to somebody or you don't know where to begin. And I love bringing you people I trust and adore and know can assist you and support you on your path. And I'm so excited to welcome April Hanna here today. Thank you for being here.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about April, and then we can jump into our topic for today. So say hello, definitely, if you're jumping on. Let us know if you're having any trouble hearing or seeing us so that we can stream beautifully on this Monday after the Christmas holiday. So who's April and why is she here? April is a producer and filmmaker, and she's also a spirituality coach. She's the founder of Hannah's Healing Wellness Studio and co-founder of a media production company that's been providing over 2 decades of clinical mental health counseling in a combination with a variety of healing modalities and consciousness studies to her clients around the world. This is why we get along. See, you like studying all this stuff. See?
Absolutely. Love it.
After co-founding her media production company, Path 11 Productions, which is so exciting and amazing, you have to check it out. We'll drop those links. In 2008, she went on to produce 3 documentaries on life after death and consciousness studies. She's the host of the Path 11 podcast and recently launched her first streaming television network, Path 11 TV. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you.
You're welcome. After April's mother passed away tragically in 2019, she immersed herself further into the study of the afterlife. And she's now made it her life's mission to use her film production company and one-on-one sessions to help others become better prepared, not only for their own death, but for the death of their loved ones. So today, we're going to talk about healing after tragedy. Thank you so much for bringing this really important topic forward. I so appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a little bit of a shock. I never thought that I would be doing podcasts about this story, but it's the way that, life kind of unfolded and also kind of really started when it came with Path 11 Productions. That was back in 2008. I had been a mental health therapist for years before that. But we began Path 11 Productions in 2008, and the co-founder, Mike Habernig, had contacted me because I was a Reiki master and I was doing Reiki, and he wanted to make a documentary about Reiki. And I was just like, I really don't want to be on camera or on film, but I have a bunch of teachers, that we could interview and stuff. And so I would say that, my spiritual awakening started before 2008 because I was very curious, in healing and how just overall people heal with my mental health background. But really in 2008, my world started to open up and explode with so many different possibilities. And to this day has just reached so many people and helping them with their grief.
Yeah. And the thing is it's that topic that a lot of people don't like to talk about, right? Like, it's like, oh, we're just going to shove this down. We're not going to talk about this. And so that's why it's so important for you to bring this forward, especially around the holidays, when people are experiencing grief or, loneliness or missing their loved ones. So what would you say to anybody who is experiencing something like that during the holiday season and otherwise?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just went through it this Christmas. My mom has only been passed about 2 years. So, my fiance and I, we were talking and, my family's so small to begin with because my aunt has already passed and my grandmother, and I grew up in pretty much an Italian household. So it was like a strong matriarch, and my grandmother used to be the one that would bring us all together. And we just had so many traditions. And then, when my grandmother passed away, the traditions changed a little bit. And then my aunt, tried to uphold those traditions. And then she passed away. And then, my cousin, which was my aunt's daughter, would try to hold the tradition. And then she's got 2 kids and a husband and is busy, and then my mom passed away. So this Christmas for me was also really interesting because my subconscious, right? The unconscious mind, my body just craves these old memories of what Christmas was like when I was younger. But the reality is it's like those people aren't here. And as much as I want to try to recreate that feeling and that warm feeling that I had and, have these traditions, these people aren't here to celebrate them with us, right? And I think that's where sometimes a lot of sadness, depression, and grief can be sparked. And it's like, oh, do I even want to do Christmas? But I really, sat with it last year and even more so this year and realized, well, the reality is what we have is right here, the here and now. And, memory and stuff can be great, but it can also take us out of the present moment. And I just really focused this year on what are the new traditions that I'm creating, with my husband to be, my fiance. He's brought in new traditions from his heritage. And I really changed up the food that I was used to eating to do something new with that, and just created different traditions that was bringing me right here in the moment today for this Christmas. And another thing that I like to do is I honor my mom and those who are lost. We actually have an ancestor altar in our house. So, we have a candle, we'll light a candle, and my mom left me a fish dish. It's called her fish wish dish. Like in 2015, she brought it over to my house, and we actually have this on video with her saying, when I'm dead and gone, I want you to bring this dish out, and every Christmas, I want you to make a wish. So that was a way to be able to bring her spirit in. And, we put our dinner on it. We sat very intentionally. We set our intentions for the year. What was our wish for 2022? And it really felt like her presence was there. So I think, doing a combination of old traditions, trying to honor the ancestors, honor the people who have passed, bring them into your Christmas, but also honor what's going on today in the here and now, to try to allow yourself to really enjoy the present moment as well. So those are a couple of things that I did last year and this year that I found really, really helpful.
I love that. That is so beautiful. And I love that. Oh my gosh, what a poignant statement that memories are wonderful, but they take us away from the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
That just like gives me chills everywhere. I absolutely love that, because it's true. It's like you get to do both. You get to honor the memory. You get to honor their presence and their energy while you remain present with what you have in front of you. And I think that's where people can struggle, is like holding both. It's like, okay, well, if I dive in and honor this person, then I'm going to be a hot mess. I think that's what they fear, right? Is that they're going to be like a hot mess and like not be able to pull themselves together and then stay present,
Exactly.
But you get to do both. It's just, I love that example that you shared with the altar and with the fish dish. And it's like, yeah, we sat very intentionally, but it's not like we sat intentionally for an entire week,
Right. Or hours.
Right. Like we gave it our love, we gave it our energy, we gave it our intention, and then we shifted into presence, which is that, and that's what she would want. Correct.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there were tears shed on Christmas. We laughed, we had a great time. We cried about it. My fiance's parents are also both passed, so it was kind of, a trip down memory lane, and by bringing their energy in and honoring some of, what used to be, but then also really cherishing what we have today. So it turned out to be really nice, even though there was some pain in there.
Of course. I mean, I think especially with, I can't remember what cosmic event was going on. I think it was the Saturn square Uranus or something, but I think it was Christmas Eve day or Christmas Day. I can't remember. I think it was Christmas Eve day. I was just like, I was just like crying, and I felt very happy, but I was just releasing energy. There was a lot of energy moving. And, it's also, my dad passed as well, almost 8 years ago now. And I felt a lot of his presence very close to me over the past couple weeks in particular. And so just honoring that when it comes up, and not being like, oh, how does this make sense? And what does this mean? But just allow it to flow through you. That's kind of what I did. I was like, yeah, I'm just allowing it to flow through me and being really gentle and patient with myself, and not, being hard on myself for whatever comes up.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. I think most people fear their grief. And like you said, it's almost like, if I allow this out, am I going to be able to function? Will the tears stop? Is it just going to get me to the point where I'm going to be bedridden for days? And I think, when you have a practice and you learn how to take really good care of your emotions, and like you said, allow them to come up, to meet them, flow with them, and then release them, and then wait for the cycle to hit you again. It's just a really great way to take care of the grief, and that's usually what I ask my clients too. It's like, well, how well are you taking care of your grief? What are you doing to take care of your grief? And I think in our culture, we're just kind of taught to like bury the emotions, be strong, charge ahead. It's almost like our society doesn't have time. Like we don't have time for grief, and I kind of felt that way in the beginning too. I was like, oh my gosh, I have 2 businesses that I have to run. Like, do I really have time to grieve right now? And I really had to make sure that I was very conscious about moving through the grief, taking care of it, still being able to function and not be afraid of it. But I think, like you said, number one thing, people can be very scared of what will happen if I actually let it out.
Yeah. And it's a practice. I mean, what you just described is a practice. It doesn't happen overnight,
Right.
The practice. So it's like starting these strategies, starting these steps. And the other piece too is that I believe that grief has its own timeline, depending on the situation, depending on the person, depending on the connection. I don't even know that it depends on the connection, to be honest, the conscious connection. I think it also depends on like the energetic cords that we have tied to this person that we might not even be aware of. You know what I mean? And so I feel like each grief experience, the grief in general, has its own timeline, and rushing it is just going to, like, it's not going to go away, And I literally just posted something the other day about how one of the number one phrases that are used with my clients that I've had to talk them through for 20 years is this concept of pushing through. Well, I just have to push through it. Well, I just have to push through it, and it's just like, where did you learn that? No, right. You don't. In fact, could you stop and just honor what's naturally coming up within you? Because it has its own timeline, and you're not going to just rush forward and complete it, and then it's going to go away. It's going to be stored within you.
Exactly. And I was talking to somebody on my podcast just about this, and we were talking about grief, and we kind of decided to eliminate the word completion and kind of said that it was more of a continuum, because grief is never completed. It just isn't. There's no such thing. And I think when we kind of have that mentality and we're reaching for it, and thinking, okay, when is this not going to bother me? There's no such thing as completion with it. I think it's just more of a journey. And, grief can take on many beautiful stages and aspects of life. And I think, when people can get to a point where they've adjusted to, as best as they can, of the person not being in the physical body, but realizing that the relationship continues in spirit form, then that opens up kind of a whole nother world. It's never the same, right? Because we really thrive on touch, our 5 senses, to be able to hear their voice, to be able to see them, be with them physically, making these memories. So it's kind of like you really have to think outside of the box of how are you going to have this relationship with them in spirit. But what I've realized with all the research that I've done over the years is that relationship can sometimes even be healthier and stronger and better. And it's very subtle, right? Because the way that spirit talks to us is in these subtle signs and, subtle messages, but it can actually become really fun and allow you to feel alive again, even though that person isn't here, but you could still feel them. Like you said, with your dad, you really just like felt his presence there with you.
I'm like so happy that you're talking about this, because that I say this all the time, that my relationship with my father is even more intimate in spiritual form, and that it's not a judgment on anyone. It's not a, oh, we didn't do this right, or a blame game. What it's about is the fact is there's a lot of resistance that exists in the human container. There's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of restrictions that we either place on ourselves or feel have been placed on us, and we haven't necessarily found our way in this particular lifetime. And so I think it's really beautiful that you brought that forward, because I've experienced the same. And the fact is that when they're in spiritual form, they're infinite, right? I mean, not that we're not infinite here, but like it gets to continue to deepen in intimacy. And we're part of that relationship, setting that intention and making that connection intentionally and opening ourselves up to. One of the things I tell my clients all the time is I'm like, it's important to put your human aside and how you viewed them in human form, because you need to cultivate a new relationship in spiritual form, because they're not the same reflection of who they were in human form. Do you find that too?
I find that too. And we aren't the same either. There's a lot of stuff that can shift for us. I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm having the same experience that you're having with your dad that I'm having with my mom. I was able to, when she passed away, release a lot of anger, and then also boundaries that I had to hold, with her because she struggled with addiction. And there was a piece of that once that person has passed, that part of me really is no longer existing. That's no longer a trial or a tribulation that is actually happening in live time right now, in my life. So as much as they shift and change, we shift and change, and we aren't the same people either. The dynamics, basically the dynamics of the relationship change, but the relationship still remains, and I've had quite a few spiritual teachers, a couple of mediums that I consulted after she passed. It's interesting because I would say almost all of them had said, April, the work that you continue to do here and the way that you work through your grief helps your mother's consciousness and spirit also heal. So it's like not for nothing, it's not just about me, but it's about that bond, probably the karmic bond, the energetic cords of consciousness that connect her consciousness to mine. And so when we heal and I heal here, it was beautiful to think that whatever I do and when I get better, she's also getting better, in that form of consciousness, that she has.
That's what's so cool about working with the infinite and working with energy. And I loved it. I got chills everywhere, of course, shocker, when you were talking about the ancestral altars and ancestral healing and honoring, because that is so close to my heart. And definitely my personal purpose here on this planet, to really shift my ancestral line in that way, in so many different ways. There's so many layers to it, but it's incredibly powerful work. It's incredibly intimate work for ourselves and for those relationships. And I love that you're bringing that forward into this conversation, because what it does is it really expands our consciousness to like enfold that concept into our experience of the quote unquote loss of this person, or at least physical loss of this person.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard this too, that like whatever you heal in the here and now heals 7 generations before you and 7 generations, after you, which is great. And that's kind of a hard concept to understand, but I've done a lot of work in shamanism and have had some just amazing teachers, and they're always bringing in the ancestors. And actually for my mom's funeral, I created altars everywhere. I didn't know how my family was going to take it or what people were going to think, but I was like, I don't care. I have to build these altars. And I built altars for every element of earth, air, water, fire, nature, and mineral. And from this one West African tradition, Malidoma Somé, he recently passed, but people want to look up some of his work. And when in that tradition, they use a water altar. You are bringing in the tears, the cleansing, the reconciliation. So I had an ancestor altar of all of our deceased ancestors at my mom's service. We had an altar for nature. I brought stuff in from nature there. We had the mineral kingdom with the crystals and the rocks, earth, what am I missing? Earth, air, water, fire, nature, mineral. I had it all, but the main centerpiece was bowls and bowls of water and candles and this blue cloth around it. And everyone participated by lighting a candle and bringing it up to the water altar and then just saying their own little prayer. And then at the end, I realized I kind of heard my mom and my grandmother saying, you better bring Catholicism in because we were raised Catholic. And I was like, okay, I hear you. I'm like, and they would like us to say the Our Father and Hail Mary for those of you that are here, so we kind of like combined that too, but it was really beautiful. And it was a different type. I have never been to a funeral like that before. Our traditional funerals in our families were you go to the funeral parlor, there's a viewing of the body, and then you go to the gravesite. Unfortunately, with my mom's accident, she had gotten hit by a car. Her body wasn't able to be viewed. So there wasn't going to be anything like with a casket or anything like that. So, we decided to have her cremated. So we just did more of like the celebration of life. And then I was able to do some educating about what does a grief altar mean? What is the element of water? How can this help us? And so that was kind of cool to, teach that to my family and friends and have them participate in something that was really different, but you could just feel the energy in the room. It was amazing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to be honest, like while you were talking about that, I was just completely mesmerized and like taken up in the frequency of it. Like I could feel it palpably. Mm-hmm. You are so powerful. I mean, it's such a beautiful soul. And I think it's such a gift that you offer to other people who are coming to that too, right? To be able to connect with their own power of moving energy and connecting to spirit or the spirit of whoever's passed. I love that. It's so beautiful. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. Yeah, I had another really cool experience that I was able to actually bring to my mom's ceremony. It was pretty intense, and it was really, I don't know, just not something really out there for you and I, but some people might be like, "Oh my gosh." So, I kind of had this intuitive feeling. I don't know if you felt this when your dad passed, but I just knew, I had this weird gut feeling that something was going to happen. Like I felt like my mom was going to die the year that she died. Didn't know how, didn't know when, and never would have guessed it was going to be the way that she had passed. But I had a guest on my podcast who had two near-death experiences. She was kidnapped and I think, I forget exactly where it was, but she was taken in by this tribe. And these women would sing her soul back into her body, and would really helped her regain her strength and live after this near-death experience. So the work that she does, her name is Robin Lansong, the work that she does is basically sound, frequency, and healing, and will sing to people, right? And sing their soul back. So I have her on my podcast. And this was before we were doing Skype and Zoom. So it was all audio, thank God. And she was like, "Well, can I sing for you?" And I was like, "Sure, absolutely." Not having any clue what's going on. And then all of a sudden she said, "Well, before I sing for you, I'm picking up on a woman that you're really worried and concerned about. And I feel like I need to sing for her protection." So she sings this beautiful melody. I am bawling my eyes out. I could barely talk. We didn't edit it out or anything for almost like a full minute. She's like, "April, you're there?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm here." And then, I kind of told the story of, my mom and my worry about her and, what was happening and going on. And the beauty of it was I was able to take that song of protection, because I have this podcast, and I was able to play this woman singing this during the ceremony, so I brought it into the ceremony, because it's like, what are the chances of that? I mean, this woman knew nothing about my personal life, had no idea about the relationship with my mom. And then, like, hindsight, because I did this interview in July, my mom passed in October. Here, this woman was picking up on that she needed to sing for my mom's protection, so there's like such beauty in that, beauty in the pain of it. And the song was just beautiful. It wasn't really of any words. It might have even been in a different language, I don't remember, but it was beautiful. And that's what started our grief ceremony, is that we allowed that song to be sung on recording. So wherever my mom's spirit might have been, because I really don't know per se what happens if people tragically die. There's so many theories out there, right? It's like, do they really find the light? Do they know that they're dead? But I just really felt like it helped in the whole grief process, not only, for me personally, because that was such a personal experience to have on my podcast, but also if my mom's spirit was having a difficult time transitioning, it's like, here was this song again, for her to hear in spirit. So it was really beautiful and really powerful.
Oh my gosh, I need to call her.
Yes, I'll give you her information.
It looks like my team actually already found her.
Yeah.
And shared a link. So yay.
She is a phenomenal woman. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. And it's so interesting too, because sound is one of the most potent forms of healing for anyone, but particularly for me. I know just with like my human design and just how I'm built, energetically too, that it just cuts right to the core very fast, and it sounds like it did the same for you. But yes. Man, that is what a beautiful gift. And I love that you're able to bring this forward to help other people. So can you share a little bit about how the passing of your mother catapulted you into the afterlife studies and kind of looking into this? Because I think that's a fascinating direction to take this when you're experiencing something so traumatic.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting is that I had been studying and kind of catapulted into the afterlife studies way before my mom passed in 2008. So in 2019, when her death occurred, I, of course, was in shock, but was almost like reflecting and thinking, oh my gosh, was all of this work that I have been doing since 2008 leading me up to this day, because the research, the understanding that I have of consciousness now, meeting so many educators in the field, so many shamans, so many healers, so many people that have had near-death experiences, from making the films to filming the Afterlife Awareness Conference for 4 years, having the podcast. I've interviewed, I think, over 360 people now on the podcast. Like, I have this arsenal of grief information at my fingertips. And I have to say that having that much research up to 2019, I think really helped my grief process in a totally different way than if I didn't have it and just started right then and there.
Yeah.
I think what my mom's death gave me a more compassionate and understanding for is when I guess you're not expecting death to happen in the way that you want it to. It's like, there was just so many things about her passing that I couldn't have, even with my psychic ability, have been able to predict. And I don't know, sometimes I feel like, well, I wish I had the grieving way that my mom had with her mother, like that we could do the funeral parlor and we could do this and do that. And when you have a tragic death that involves police involvement and investigation, there's almost like an entire tie-up to it, that kind of suspends your grief in some ways. So I'm, still kind of on this path too of, basically unpackaging everything that I've gone through, but also wanting to do a little more work with people who have also experienced more of that traumatic and tragic death, So the other thing that it has also really encouraged me to want to investigate a little bit more is after-death communication. So this year with Path 11 Productions, we're in the process of beginning that next documentary about after-death communication and really studying that more and understanding it. And I just had a person on my podcast this week about shared death experiences because, here I was having this really strange intuitive feeling that something's going to happen to my mom. And then my cousin actually dreamt at the same exact time that my mom was hit, had a nightmare of a woman being hit by a maroon car, and her leaving her body. And my cousin's husband was like up at 1 o'clock in the morning, was like, something feels off. I don't know what's going on. I can't sleep. And then once we had received the police report, that was like the exact time that the accident had occurred. So that has also launched me into really wanting to understand more about the shared death experience and really trying to just find more information about after-death communication, because I really feel that with the work that I've been doing with Path 11, it's so important for people to know that the relationship does not die, and would love to see people kind of move out of the heavy, dense part of grief and, be able to become a little more curious about where our loved ones are in the afterlife and how we can still have that relationship and come to more of that acceptance of it being different, and changed, but different, but in a good way. So that's kind of where our research is going to be moving, this year after that. And then the other piece, I haven't done it yet. I think when the time is right, but I really hope to one day have contact with the driver. Being a mental health therapist for, 20 years, of course, the other part of me just wonders about him, his PTSD,
Yeah.
How, it's like there's another person out there whose life completely changed 360 degrees on the same day as mine. Like, we are bonded, our souls are bonded, right? There's part of this soul contract, trying to understand, this person being chosen, with this event happening. And would just like love for him and I to be able to maybe have a conversation to be able to heal whatever's going on for him, and same for me. And I just can't imagine, it was tragic. It was, he was coming home from work late at night, and it could have happened to anyone. It was a country road, it wasn't lit up, and the clothes that my mom had it wasn't bright. It wasn't like hot pink or white or anything, So it's like, when you think about that, that could easily happen to me, could happen to you. You just never know. And so I feel like there's just something really strange about this whole experience and process that never connects somebody like me to the driver to be able to have an opportunity to heal. Not saying that he wants that, I'm not sure, but I just have been kind of thinking a lot about that and thinking about writing a letter or seeing if he would be open to it, just to be able to allow any healing that might need to be healed on his behalf, but also mine. It like seems just kind of weird that, there's another person out there that shares this day with me and like we don't even talk about it. And that could be the therapist in me too. It's like,
but
let's process.
I also think it's the Reiki master in you and like being connected to the energy, because you're exactly right. This is fascinating. Like you're exactly right. Like you are 100% energetically tied to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true. Like you literally share one of the most traumatic events of both of your lives and you've never communicated. That's so interesting.
Yeah. And I think I might have mentioned that. I might have mentioned it, I think, when I was speaking to somebody on my podcast, and they had said, yeah, well, because that's the law, right? The legalities of it. People are afraid to get sued or whatever this may be, and it's like, I don't know if there's fear of that or like why the police wouldn't even facilitate a communication or seeing like if that was possible. But, it's like, I understand it. People get, excited to sue others, but it's not about that. I look at it a totally different thing. Like there's a part of me that's curious about it, thinking, oh, if I get to know him, would there be something on the spiritual path that would make a lot of sense as to the timing of it, right? Divine timing. Everything happens in this perfect divine timing. So, I just find that there could be parts or elements to the story that, just really might make sense for the both of us.
Yeah. And I was even just thinking about it too. I was like, okay, so it was 1:00 in the morning, the accident, right?
Mm-hmm. Right about. Yeah.
And here you have Path 11 TV, which is one doubled, one amplified. Like what made you choose that name?
Yeah. So Path 11, well, it was kind of the 11:11 phenomenon. I think a lot of people have experienced it.
Yeah.
And so the name came from, we were on a path, a spiritual path. And every time we went in to edit our films, we would hit 11:11, 1:11. Then we met with a woman that did numerology and did our numerology. And Mike was a life path 11 and I was a life path 9, but the 11 showed up. And then I needed to get like my birthday and the time that I was born. And I was born at 1:11 p.m. And then Mike and I lived 11 miles apart from each other when we had first met. It just like went on and on and on. So it was just like constantly showing up for us. So we just figured we have to bring the 11 in somehow, some way. And that's how we got the name of Path 11.
Oh, that's so cool. But yeah, I was thinking about that energetic link with the time of your mom's passing too. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But it's like everything's connected,
Yeah, it's not crazy, actually. It's completely aligned. Yeah, exactly.
I know. Mm-hmm.
So when you work with people, I know that you're obviously using a production company to assist with getting this information out there and bringing people into this understanding. But also when you work with people one-on-one, how do you assist them with just this process?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what they're coming in with. It's like this morning I had a phone call with a girl who is just starting on her spiritual awakening, right? And she has a lot of the empathic things of, I go into a room and I can feel everyone's energy and it feels icky and I don't know what to do with it, and having premonition dreams and things of that sort. And then I work with a lot of people doing energy work. Of course I bring in the clinical component because I was a clinical therapist for 20 years and have moved more into like the spiritual coaching and really trying to help people on their spiritual path and awaken on their spiritual path. So it's a combination. It's a combination of really what they need of energy work, sitting down and talking, spiritual talking. I was a therapist that would give people a lot of homework. So, I'm usually like, oh, you got to listen to this podcast, or how about this book, or, this or that. And we just kind of like, work it out. It really depends on what people are going through. I don't just specialize in grief. I do have a lot of people that come to me because they do know of my production company. They know that I'm well-read, well-studied, and now very well experienced in it. So I think that provides people some comfort. But I work with a lot of people who will come in and they just say, I just feel lost. I don't know who I am anymore. And really trying to help people return them back to their soul, returning them back to their purpose, reminding them of why they're here, how can they live out their best life? Very similar to the stuff that you do. I just don't know how to get into the Akashic records like you do. So we do it in I guess, a different way, and I teach a lot. And I do teach, like you teach, Reiki and intuitive development classes. I do a woman's wellness series every January. I have a 21-day joy experience that's coming up in January, really helping people, creating the habit of joy for the 21 days. So I'm always trying to challenge myself to bring new things, to people and my clients, and have moved into a little bit more of teaching and doing some sound healing with sound bowls. And I've also this year incorporated art, because I took a class that incorporated art for my grieving, and it was fascinating and moved out some of the grief that was stored in my body that was causing me some physical symptoms. And then I put it onto the canvas, and my body started to heal.
Wow.
So it's just kind of like the mind, body, emotion connection, and finding different outlets to be able to release it and clear it. So, I'm still learning, and whatever I learn, I just bring to my clients, and I'm like, all right, guys, let's do this. They're like, okay. And, we just have a great time doing it.
But I love that too, because it's you showing up so authentically, and you reflecting your own growth to them.
Absolutely.
And as you up level, you're continuing to bring that up level to the people who are in your field, which is so cool. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Oh, this is so beautiful. I honor you so deeply. I'm so grateful that we are connected. And thank you so much for coming on here today and sharing with people. Is there anything in particular that you would really love them to know before we close up?
Well, I would love for them to know about Path 11 TV. Like you said, it's hard to run a business that wants to talk about death all the time. So we've realized that it's like, okay, but I would really encourage people that don't wait to learn about it until you're hit with death. I would love for people to be more curious and not afraid to talk about it, to watch videos about it, to learn about it. So I wanted to offer, people that are watching this and that are listening afterwards, they can have a free trial on path11tv.com. That's where they can go to. There's a 7-day free trial, but if they decide to sign up, I wanted to give them the code podcast30, and that would give them 30% off of either a monthly membership or an annual membership. And on there, we just have it's like a phenomenal library of research, of consciousness studies, afterlife. We have UFOs, paranormal stuff, grief and bereavement, spirituality and sexuality. There is just so much on there. We have over 100 hours, and we have new content that comes in every Friday. We're filming more films this year. So, I guess if a person isn't grieving, but they know of someone, this is such an amazing resource that we have put out there for people. And it's really the research that we were looking for to heal ourselves, and even, heal myself now in these past couple of years, but advancing us further. So it's kind of like when people sign up, they're joining our journey. It's like we're all in this together. And I kind of feel like, life is just one big journey of grief. It's like we are constantly losing things. We're constantly dying, being reborn. It's like the walk of life is like a walk with grief. You can't escape it. It doesn't take somebody dying for you to be grieving. There's so many different types of loss. So even though some of this is about grief and bereavement, it could be about relationships. It could be about loss of sense of self. So I would just love for people to learn more, to use Path 11 TV as a resource for friends, family, coworkers, and just, spread the word, and let's stop being afraid to talk about death, because it's going to happen, right? None of us are getting out of here alive or in this physical body. So
exactly. Well, and I would even say too, even as you've been watching this, either live or on the replay, be really conscious of what comes up into your field, be conscious of if your chest tightens at one point when we talk about a certain piece of what we've talked about today, if you're feeling a little anxious, if you're feeling like, ugh, any of those reactions are areas or cues for you to understand a little bit more deeply, to learn more about, to educate yourself about, that it doesn't just mean, oh, this isn't for me, right? It means that there's resistance coming up in your human to talk about or face the inevitable, like you just said, and to be able to really open yourself to curiosity and awareness instead of shutting down, right? Because when we talk about things like we've talked about today, you're going to have a thought or a reaction emotionally or physically. So just be conscious of that, as a guide going forward. And then April has this absolutely beautiful resource library really for you, this entire library to be able to get the answers and support that you're looking for as you're navigating it. So thank you so much. This was so beautiful.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Laura. And I love the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for having me as a guest today. I'm honored as well.
You're so welcome. And I'll see you guys next Monday for another episode of Heal Profoundly and Enduringly at 11 a.m. Eastern next Monday. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.